My name is Connor Jefferson, and I used to be a swimmer. I lived in a small town, and for those of you who live in small towns, you know there's really nothing much to do. So 14 years ago, when a town pool opened and a coach started a swimming club, it brought a bright change to the town. At first, people didn't pay much attention to it, as things got boring really fast. But with time, the team started growing, and eventually, one of our best swimmers made it to the Olympics. After the games that year, our swimmer brought back a silver medal, and the whole town couldn't stop talking about it. From that moment on, swimming became a huge part of our town as we formed numerous inter-house teams and competitions. The whole team would normally come to watch the inter-house competitions, and after the games, the standout swimmer would be chosen to represent us in the Olympic trials. As the affinity for swimming grew in our little town, so did my love for it. I started practicing every day to participate in the games, and I was eventually put on one of the town's best teams. We were called the Silver Dolphins, and we were the pride of the town. We always led the board in every game we participated in, and the Olympic swimmer was always picked from our team. I loved every single one of my teammates. They were like brothers to me, as I had known most of them since we were kids, and every year when the swimming game started, we always carried out what we called harmless rituals on a man called Edgar Scott. He was the janitor or cleaner of the town pool, and we always messed with him by carrying out these little pranks like stealing and hiding his cleaning tools, trekking dirt on the floor he just cleaned, and taking the keys to his office. Looking back on it now, it was a pretty rude thing to do, but it became like a ritual that our team had to carry out every year, and we made sure they were always harmless. Mr. Edgar also never seemed to mind. He was a quiet guy who had been at the pool since it opened, and I didn't think he cared about the pranks we carried out, as he never apprehended us for what we did. So we always looked forward to doing it every coming year. Now, while I loved the swimming competitions, my teammates, and the pranks, in recent years, the swimming games had started carrying a bad stigma in the town because about 5 years ago, a morbid incident started happening in our little town, as a reoccurring missing person case was always open every time the swimming season started. Over the years, more than 15 boys had mysteriously disappeared, and while there was no concrete reason to associate the missing persons with the games, the strange thing was, each and every one of those boys who disappeared was on the swimming team, and they had all gone missing during the reoccurring swimming seasons. Being a small town, losses like this were felt throughout the community. The town's cops tried their best to find out why the boys were going missing, but they always ended up with dead ends, as they believed someone outside of the town with an unknown motive was coming to kidnap the boys during the swimming season. But with no ransom calls, those theories were never proven. Some townspeople believed the boys were running away, but that theory was also thrown out, as it didn't match most of the victims' characters or personalities. The cops did everything they could, but with no bodies to bury or closure, the grieving families started to call for the swimming games to stop, as they believed it was the cause of their missing children. But by that time, the games had become such an integral part of our town and our lives that it wasn't approved. Although numerous security measures were taken during the swimming season, as people coming into town during this time were always questioned and checked, and security guards were positioned at the town pool and assigned to watch over the contestants. As swimmers, we always had a bit of fear during this season, as we knew any one of us could be next, but our passion far outmatched our fear, and it never stopped us from participating in the games. It was the 11th of October 2013 when it happened. I was practicing late that night, so not many people were there. When I was done with practice, I took a shower in the public bathroom at the town pool building. Normally, everyone on the team always took showers together after the swimming practice or games. But since I decided to practice late, I was the only one in the public bathroom that night. I started my shower and everything was going fine, till I started hearing the strangest noises. I was the only one there, so I was a bit confused as to where the noise was coming from. I turned off the shower to listen a bit better, and that's when I realized the sounds were coming from the drain. I could tell it was clogged, and before I could do anything, it started releasing the contents that clogged it. At first, I was disgusted as the massive hair clumps and excessive soap lumps began to resurface, but within seconds, my disgust turned to fear, as I froze at the sight of something truly morbid. There was no mistaking it. Right there in the middle of the hair clumps, the soap clumps, and the rest of the gunk that clogged the drain was a human finger. It was rotten, but I knew exactly what I was looking at. So I screamed and ran out of the public bathroom. I ran all the way to the pool area before I saw my now bewildered coach staring at me. Apparently, he had come to pick up some things when he heard me scream, and he asked me what was wrong. I tried to find the words to speak, but I couldn't. I eventually managed to stutter, There's a human finger in the bathroom." Shocked at my statement, he immediately said, "Show me." So I quickly took him to the public bathroom. When he got there, he asked me, "Where is it?" And as I looked around the bathroom floor, I realized that it wasn't there anymore. My coach, who now had a perplexed look on his face, looked at me and said, "Are you sure it was a human finger you saw? I mean, all I'm seeing here is a drain that's clogged. Maybe you mistook it for one of those hair clumps." Confused, I started to say, "No, it was a human finger. I saw it. The drain clogged up and it came out with the rest of the gunk on the floor, and it was right there in the middle of all of it. I know what I saw, Coach. Believe me." My coach, who was now looking at me like I was a crazy person, took a deep breath as he said, "Look, Connor, I know you saw something, but I'm sure it wasn't a finger. I know the swimming season is here again, and maybe all the tension from the games, in addition to the fear of the reoccurring strange missing person cases, is getting to you. So you may be seeing things, and if that's the case, I really think you should take a break." When he was done talking, I had nothing else to say, as I knew if I kept defending myself, I would have looked crazier than I already did. I stopped swimming for a while after that, as what I saw that night became an obsession for me. During the weeks that followed the incident, I always sat on the bench during practice, and the people around me started getting worried about my mental health. But deep down, I knew I didn't hallucinate or conjure it up, because to me, that human finger was as real as everyone around me. One particular afternoon, I was sitting on the bench at practice as the other swimmers, when the janitor, Mr. Edgar, came up to me. He sat down beside me and asked, "How are you doing, champ?" I was a bit stunned at first, as I had known him my whole life, but I had never actually spoken to him. But I answered with, "I saw something morbid in the public bathroom and no one believes me. Everyone just thinks I'm crazy." Mr. Edgar then looked at me with a smile and said, "I believe you." Shocked, I replied, "You do?" He then said, "Of course I do. Only God knows what has been flushed down toilets or drainages in these days and age. So it's not that far-fetched. Trust me, I'm a janitor, so I've seen some shit." I found myself smiling as he spoke, because for the first time since the incident, someone actually believed me. Mr. Edgar then continued with, "I've seen how this incident is getting to you, so I decided to talk to you about it today. You're so upset that you aren't swimming anymore. And that's sad, because you're one of the best swimmers, and we really need you to make the town proud." I thanked him for the compliment as he continued with, "As I said earlier, Connor, I believe you saw something that night. I mean, maybe there's a crazed mafia boss who cuts fingers off in a nearby town. Maybe it was a weirdly shaped soap that looked like a finger. Or maybe it was a radioactive worm that the government flushed down the pipe. You know you can't trust those guys." I laughed at his jokes as he finished his statement with, "But the point is, don't let this get you down, okay? And if you ever need to talk, I'm here for you." I smiled as I said, "Thank you for your words, Mr. Edgar. I'm glad we talked. To be honest, I thought you hated us because all the pranks we pulled on you." Mr. Edgar then laughed and said, "I could never hate you boys. You're the pride of our town. Besides, it's just harmless fun, and recently, I've actually started looking forward to what you boys come up with next year." We both laughed at his last statement, and we continued to talk into the afternoon. After my discussion with Mr. Edgar, I decided to stop obsessing over what happened that night. I started swimming again, and things were going great. I even started my late-night practices again to get even better. One night, after a long day of practice, I went to take my usual after-swim shower. It took a while this time, but just like that night, the drain started making noises again. I wanted to ignore it as I didn't want to experience another traumatizing incident, but as much as I tried, I couldn't. I told myself that this was my chance to prove to everyone that I was right. So I acted on my impulsive thoughts as I decided to manually clog the drain. I stuffed huge wads of tissue rolls and any other thick material I could find into the drain while keeping the shower running at full force. It was disgusting work, but I did it anyway, as if my plan worked, I could prove I wasn't lying. It didn't take long before the drain started groaning loudly, and within minutes, it expelled everything from its depths like a geyser. As I looked around the now filthy public bathroom, I had no words. For starters, the drain cover had popped during the small explosion, and all the things that were clogging it were now gushing out. The first thing I noticed were the small clumps that looked like shredded meat, but as I looked around, the assortment of human fingers, toes, and teeth told me everything I needed to know. The sight was so ghastly that I didn't feel the vomit till it was gushing out of my throat. I was scared shitless at the morbid scene, but I knew there was enough proof here to prove I was telling the truth, so I ran to get someone. The first person I saw was Mr. Edgar. He had heard the explosion and came to see what happened, so I screamed, "Call the cops, Mr. Edgar! There's human body parts gushing out of the public bathroom's drain!" But instead of rushing for his phone, he looked at me calmly and said, "I'm sorry, Connor, but I can't do that." Shocked, I screamed, "Why? Didn't you hear me? There are human body parts. We need to call the cops." Mr. Edgar then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Why? Well, because I put them there." His words made me freeze as I slowly asked, "What did you just say?" He then replied with, "You heard me. Those body parts belong to the town's 15 missing boys. I cut them up and flushed them down the drain." I don't really have words to explain how I felt as he said those words, but I can never forget the feelings, as it was a mixture of true horror and fear. I remember looking at him in shock as I said, "Jesus, did you do this because we pranked you?" Mr. Edgar then calmly replied me with, No, Connor. I told you the truth that day. I bore no ill towards you boys. But look at it like this. The same way you enjoy those silly pranks is the same way I enjoyed killing and shredding those boys. It's like a hobby of sorts." As Mr. Edgar spoke, I finally realized what it meant to be a psychopath. I watched in horror as he talked about the brutal and morbid murder of 15 people like it was a normal, everyday thing. He even likened the ghastly act to that of a hobby. When he was done, Mr. Edgar then looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Connor. It's such a small town, so I don't really have many options when it comes to disposing of the bodies after having my fun. But I have to clean the mess you made, and to do that, I also have to end you." I didn't fully register what he said, and before I could do anything, I saw him lunge toward me with a huge knife. Instinctively, I raised my hand to defend myself from the blow, and the knife went straight through my palm. The pain I felt was unbearable, but I didn't stop to scream, as I knew if I stopped defending myself for a second, I was going to die. Till today, I don't know where the strength came from, but I managed to keep fighting and pushing back his attacks. We struggled as we tried to take each other to the ground. Fighting back with a knife lodged in my hand sent searing pain through my whole body. I was losing a lot of blood, and the world started getting dark around me. But I kept fighting and hoping that I'd come out of this brawl alive. Luckily for me, Mr. Edgar lost his footing on the wet floor and he slipped. I immediately took the opportunity as I managed to land a good kick on his torso. The force sent him flying back and he hit his head on the hard floor. As he lay there motionless, I thought I had killed him. As my mind started to unravel, I realized I had reached my limit and I couldn't take it anymore. But my legs started running. I ran out of the building, screaming at the passerbys to call the cops, and within minutes, the building was surrounded. The officers asked me what happened, so I told them I was attacked by the town's pool janitor, Edgar. When I was done, they all quickly rushed into the building to find him, but when they came out, they said no one was there. I tried to respond, but I had lost a lot of blood. I saw the world get darker as I fell to my knees and passed out. I woke up 2 days later in the hospital, surrounded by my family. It didn't take long before the cops showed up to ask me more questions about what happened, so I retold them everything that happened in great detail, and by the week's end, everything was revealed. I found out that the human remains that I made come out of the drain were still there when the cops searched the building. The town's pool was then closed as a thorough investigation of the drainage pipes was carried out. The cops, in addition to the forensics, spent weeks retrieving the numerous body parts of the 15 victims. The body parts of the victims were already decayed, scattered, and mixed together, so it was hard to tell who was who, and the grieving families still didn't have any bodies to bury. An assortment of bloody butcher knives was found in the back of the town pool's storage unit, where the janitor used to stay. Detectives deduced Edgar Jefferson manually cut off the toes, fingers, and heads of his victims first, as he enjoyed it, before shredding the rest of the body into bits and pieces. Edgar himself was never found, as reports stated he managed to escape before being captured, and he still remains at large to this very day. Even after so many years, this incident still rings fresh in the minds of every single person in our town. The passion for the swimming sport is gone, as no one swims anymore, and the extensive PTSD from the incident made everyone swear to never go near a pool again. Well, everyone except me. I won't lie, it took a couple of years to get the courage back, and while I know I'd never get over the trauma that I experienced that day, I'm not going to let that morbid experience define me. I still want to be a swimmer, and even though it's hard, I'm still going to try, one step at a time.
Hi, my name is Sam. My entire life, I lived in Detroit, Michigan, born and raised. I had what many would call a rough upbringing, having spent the majority of my childhood in less than favorable areas of the city. Day in and day out, I saw violence, drug use, and crime. I learned to live in a state of constant vigilance, always watching over my shoulder for potential trouble. I learned to avoid being outdoors after sundown, to avoid the common gang violence that often broke out and left many dead. I became desensitized to everything, except what occurred to me that day in the bathroom. That day will remain imprinted in my brain forever. I was 11 years old when it happened. My friends and I were accustomed to going to the local park after school, waiting for our mothers to get home from work. My group consisted of 8 boys, the perfect number for most games. Some days, we'd play a game of basketball. Other days, soccer. On occasion, we develop random games that keep us all entertained. But of course, as soon as the sun began to go down, we all knew to go home. The first time I saw the writing was just like any other day. My friends and I were taking a break from our basketball game. We sat sprawled out on unkept grass next to the hoops, panting and laughing. We told jokes and poked fun at each other, in a way only 11-year-olds can. "Where you going?" asked my friend Jake, watching me get up. "Gotta take a leak," I said. The park's bathroom was a small room made of cement blocks. It was old, dilapidated, and to any newcomer, it could easily be confused as a non-working facility. It had no air conditioning, and it reeked of old urine. We'd all heard rumors that the older boys would smoke weed here at night, and honestly, I believed it. The bathroom was never visited by adults and was disgusting. I pulled the heavy metal door and entered. The stench of bodily fluids hit my face, causing me to scrunch my nose. There was only one bathroom stall and a sink. I opened the door and began relieving myself. I stood in front of the toilet humming a song, when something caught my eye. On the other side of the stall, I noticed a few words written in permanent marker. The words were small, but new and unfaded. The bright red letters popped among a wall of vanished old graffiti. I squinted and read, "I wish I had a friend." I finished my business and dug through my pockets. I had a marker that I stole from math class. Smirking, I wrote under the text, "Sucks to suck." I chuckled, washed my hands, and left. To this day, I wish I hadn't done that. Weeks passed. I had forgotten entirely of that crude joke I made, when I found myself in that stall yet again. Amidst going to the bathroom, I turned towards the wall and was greeted by more text. Under my old reply, more bright red letters read, "I'm so lonely. Won't you please be my friend?" I began to formulate another insult, but stopped. I wonder what jokester was trying to play a prank on me. Heck, I decided to play along. "Fine, I'll be your friend," I wrote. I left the bathroom, but the wall remained fresh on my mind. Throughout the next day, I couldn't stop thinking about that bathroom wall. I knew it was some sort of twisted joke, but I wanted to spring it. I knew I wouldn't be tricked, but I couldn't help but wonder who was playing this prank on me. As soon as school ended, we arrived at the park. I ditched my friends and ran to the bathroom. Less than 24 hours had passed since my previous visit, yet a reply was written on the wall. "Great, I'm Johnny. What's your name?" Was I really going to have a conversation with a stranger on a bathroom wall? I shrugged and wrote my name. For 12 days, we communicated via messages on the wall. I told none of my friends, out of fear of being teased, but always rushed to the public bathroom, eager to see his message. I learned that Johnny was 13, attended Lincoln Middle School, a school across town, and that he had no friends. Slowly, my messages turned from insulting remarks to friendly banter, and finally evolved into a genuine interest in him. On the 13th day, I ran directly to the bathroom wall, ignoring my friends that waited for me on the basketball court. I stood in shock. The wall was void of any graffiti, writing, or illustrations. The wall appeared to be brand new. Only one message, in the same tiny red letters, marked the otherwise perfect wall. "Meet me here tomorrow at 8 p.m. I started contemplating my options. Disappointment grew in me as I realized I had grown fond of Johnny. Initially, I was sure this was an elaborate prank at my expense. Could Johnny be a real boy in need of a friend? I returned to my old friends without responding. That night, sleep escaped me. I laid in my bed for hours, mulling over my options and unable to make up my mind. The next day, I left school and headed for the park. I ran to the bathroom, eager to see if Johnny had left another message after I didn't reply. He hadn't. The same 6 words were displayed on the wall. I returned to my friends, unsure of what to do. I didn't really think about it. I didn't give it much thought. I just acted. As my friends said their goodbyes, I pretended to walk home, but as soon as I lost sight of them, I turned back towards the park. I glanced at my watch. 7 p.m. I had 1 hour. The sun began to set, bringing anxiety to my decision. Was I crazy? I decided I wanted to meet Johnny, but in the off chance that this was indeed a prank, I decided to play it safe. I crouched behind a tree with a clear view of the bathrooms. I hid and observed from afar. If a boy entered the bathroom at 8 p.m., I'd reveal myself. Otherwise, it was all a joke, I decided. I glanced at my watch again. 8 p.m. The sun had set. Panic began to settle in my stomach. I was out alone, in complete darkness, in one of the most dangerous areas of town. It was everything my parents taught me never to do. All for some stupid message on a bathroom wall. I stood from my hiding place, filled with adrenaline, ready to sprint home. That's when great force shoved me from behind, sending me crashing onto the ground. I turned and saw him. He towered over me, had greasy hair stuck to his forehead. He wore glasses and was extremely overweight. He appeared to be my parents' age. His enormous hand slammed over my mouth, muffling any words I tried to yell. His knee came over my chest, immobilizing me. "Hi, Sam," he said in a high-pitched voice. "I'm Johnny. Nice to meet ya." He wasted no time. He placed a burlap sack over my face and picked me up. His hand remained over my mouth. "If you say a word, I'll snap your neck," he whispered shrilly. He pulled me close to him and began walking. The night's darkness shrouded us. No one noticed a thing. My body was thrown like a ragdoll into the back of his car. Free of his muting hand, I let out a harrowing scream. But it was too late. The door was shut. My screams were nothing but a muffled whisper in the night. 4 hours later, my parents contacted the police, beginning a search that would last for 2 weeks, with no success. The man that took me later identified himself as James Gomez. He held me captive for 7 weeks. I remained locked in the basement for that time. Every morning, He'd give me food and water, but otherwise left me alone. For those weeks, I woke up every day expecting and thinking, today is the day he's going to kill me. But that day never came. On the 8th week, he turned himself in to the police. Law enforcement rushed into his basement, surprised to find me unharmed and perfectly healthy. It's been years since that terrible day, but I continue to relive it. The events were traumatic, but I can't help but wonder if perhaps James Gomez was truly as lonely as his fictional character Johnny pretended to be. Every day, as I walk through a busy street, I ponder, how many lonely people are close to crossing the line into kidnapping to satiate their loneliness?